Thank you very much, dear friends. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to share with you. I am lucky. I'm surrounded by a wife who is an eye surgeon and who for more than 30 years of her life was dedicated to work on the eyes of the poor in Mexico, making practically no money at all, but working full-time in a hospital that served 350,000 people every year, practically at no cost. My daughter is following in her footsteps, also an eye surgeon. My other daughter works for the UNDP, working for some of the poorest communities in the world, out of New York with the Equator program, which tries to find productive as well as ecologically sustainable programs. And I also have a son. I won't apologize for that, but his wife is a neurosurgeon, a neuroscientist, a PhD in neuroscience who is doing research in Cambridge, out of Cambridge, in the Sanger Institute. So, for me, the question of equality is practically just second nature. I am surrounded, I'm privileged to be surrounded in the OECD by a chief economist, Catherine Mann, who is a woman, a chief statistician, Madame Durand, who is a woman, and by one of my deputy secretary generals, Mari Kiviniemi, former Prime Minister of Finland, a distinguished woman, and I have to say by my chief of staff and G20 Sherpa, who works with Asia here very extensively, and I will allude to that complicity, that partnership that the Sherpas have in a moment. So again, you know, every day in my work, I'm the beneficiary of the talent, the effort, and basically the equality of women. And today I am also benefited by the fact that my notes were written by a very smart and very competent young lady who must be someplace around here. Neshla, where are you? Raise your hand. I don't see her here, where she's sitting. She also happens to be a very beautiful young lady. Neshla, I'm sorry, but I'm going to follow the example of the Prime Minister and Madame Lagarde. I'm not going to very faithfully follow the script that you wrote for me, but anyway. Let me just say, you know, in our case, G20, B20, L20, Y20, T20, C20, you know, I was mentioning with Mademoiselle Erdogan saying, so why not W20? You know, well, the problem is after you get to a certain proliferation of the brand, people are very resistant. The problem is that perhaps this would have been the second brand, the second 20, you know, simply because the business don't represent half of mankind, and the think tanks don't represent mankind, and the labor unions don't represent half of mankind, and the youth don't represent half of mankind, and civil society doesn't represent half of mankind. So it is appropriate. It was challenging to get us here, but it is appropriate. Now, let me also say something I've been repeating again and again and again. Women are the most underutilized economic asset in the world economy. Now, I say this because, you know, to follow up on these ideas about the quality of participation, etc., regardless of what you think about the ethics and the morality and your own personal family convictions, whatever, it is really about making sure that the economies acquire new dynamism by incorporating as many women possible. We had our 50th anniversary a few years ago at the OECD, The chair of that occasion was Hillary Clinton. She was then Secretary of State of the United States. And she left us a homework. She said, do something big, very challenging, in-depth, in-breadth about gender, and deliver to the next ministerial meeting next year. So since 2012, since 2013, 14, 15, we have been working on this, delivering different chapters. We had the privilege of Lakshmi here, the UN Women, and many of you participating in many of our events. This is ongoing. Different from Christine's experience, who said when she got to the fund, she had to push them in order to deal with women. When I got to the OECD, they had been dealing with women long time before. And the issue of women actually had been there. And a very humbling example happened when we suddenly came out with our final report about the 3 E's: employment and education and entrepreneurship, the 3 E's. And we were looking for some good words for a preface, for the presentation, to make it sticky, to make a good commercial slogan, to make it fit, because they produce so many books, so many reports. We did not want it to be too boring. And we found some words saying that women were, and suddenly one of the old officials at the OECD said, I am very sorry, Mr. Secretary General, I don't want to cause you any problem, but let me just say that practically exactly the same words that you are proposing to put in the paragraph are what we put in the document about the participation of women in 1981. Oh my God. We were, of course, very humbled, because we were being told effectively that 30 years ago, 34 years ago actually, already those issues were on the table and we were being looked at and we were being addressed. And the only thing I could tell you is, if you put things in that perspective, the only reflection and the only conclusion we can arrive at is, my God, we're late. And therefore, we have to, if anything, increase the sense of urgency. I would even say the sense of emergency in terms of catching up. Let me tell you another little story. Both Christine and the Prime Minister alluded to the fact that in the G20 in Brisbane, in Australia last year, there was a breakthrough. The breakthrough was that after a lot of work, finally, the G20 chair, Australia, but also the rest, accepted the 25 by 25 target. All of you are familiar, reduction of the gap in participation in the labor markets by women by 2025. And frankly, 2025 is around the corner. It's less than 10 years from now. Well, everything has an origin and a reason, a raison d'être, as we say in the village where we come from, the OECD in Paris. We had been working on this question about how do we make a representation that is powerful, simple, and sticky, like when we were working on the problem of obesity, which is a worldwide problem. Now, somebody came up with the title of our book. It said, fit, not fat, fantastic, fantastic. It says everything that we want to say, fit, not fat. Well, we wanted something like that, to represent. And one of them said, why don't we find a target, a numbers target that can focus, just like the, Millennium Development Goals or something like that, with a target. So we started working on the thing, but, nobody was picking up. Nobody really was, oh my God, one more target. And it was, so suddenly, our Sherpa,